everybody that it's on the lobby waiting. Ready? 1, 2, 3. There we go.
Hope the class is going well for you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're letting just give it a couple minutes, let everybody get in to the meeting. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, really, 12:30. We're just going to give another minute or two for folks to join, and then we'll get started. All right, folks, one more minute for people to get started. As we're waiting, you can go ahead and type in your name and organization in the chat for roll call. That way we can reach out to you if necessary. You can start populating that now. We'll give it just another minute for folks to join. Okay, I think we're ready. It seems like folks are coming in more slowly, so we'll get started. We've got a lot of content to get through, and so thanks for joining us today. My name is Michael Catanzaro. I'm the energy manager for the city of Tucson. I'm the project manager. Been working with GDS throughout the study. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide, Amber. Just some ground rules for the meeting itself today here. We're getting recorded. I asked already, and please, if you haven't done so, please enter your name and organization in the chat for roll call. Keep your mics muted. We'll also be proactive in that. I've already heard some sort of chatter in the background. If you want to speak, please just raise your hand and we'll call on you. We're going to try to go through the presentation first, and we'll hold for questions till the end. There's a lot of content to get through, and I really want to make sure we cover it, and we'll leave lots of time for discussion at the end. And general etiquette, try not to make the same point more than once. If others are making a point that you want to make, you can kind of use the reaction buttons to sort of signal support. But my hope is we can get through all the comments, through all the content, and then all the questions and comments too. So I'm going to try to ask people to be to operate with as much brevity as possible. So that's great. And then at any time, you can also take down my email address. It's michael.catanzaro@tucsonaz.gov. You can send me feedback. There's also a feedback form online where the energy sourcing study is published. if there's additional questions or comments. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Just a general timeline. We issued the report last Friday. Today is our final public presentation. The purpose of this is to get input from the community, and then we will present the report to mayor and council right now as of May 20th. So in about a month, we'll be in front of mayor and council providing a report update. Okay, Robert, I'll take a question real quick.
Michael, I'm getting an error, can't display presentation. There was a problem displaying the content.
Okay, is anybody else having that issue? Rick?
No.
Perhaps you leave and come back in, Robert. You want to see if that'll clear that?
I'll try that.
We'll make sure we'll admit you right away.
Okay, Michael, you want us to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and go get started, and then worst case, I can shoot Robert just a copy, a PDF of the presentation. Okay, take it away. Matt, are you gonna start or Amber?
Yeah, I'm gonna start.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, as Michael mentioned, it's afternoon for most of us. Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to present a summary of the report. My name is Matthew Butler. I'm with GDS. My colleague Amber Geschwind and I will be giving the presentation today. And we're also joined by other colleagues, Howard Choi, Garrett Cole, Kevin Mara, and Ryan Barron. GDS has been around for almost 40 years. And during that time, power supply advisement, retail and wholesale rate making, and transaction-related work similar to the project like this that involves valuation, operations assessment, and otherwise have been a core part of our business. In addition, we've been very engaged in the community choice aggregation arena for the last 15 years. And so that's a quick summary about our firm and where we come from as we're doing this work for the city of Tucson. Next slide. The study, which was made public last week, has a specific scope that focuses on financial feasibility. The analysis utilizes available industry information and evaluates various sensitivities to make sure we understand how key variables influence those results, as you'll see in slides further in the presentation. The study is not a formal risk assessment, and the scope did not require the development of an implementation plan. Those would be things that might be considered later by the city after assessing the results of the study. Next slide. Specifically, the intent of the study was to evaluate specific energy sourcing options for financial feasibility in meeting the city's electric sustainability goals. There were two specific solutions that would serve the city as a whole: municipalization and community choice aggregation. And then there were several that could serve municipal operations specifically: solar service agreements, virtual power purchase agreements, and microgrids in the city. Next slide. Okay, so getting into the actual study and the results, there's 6 sections of the presentation today. Seeing where the energy sourcing options fit within the electric utility supply chain, a review of city maps and recent historical TEP rates, the power supply analysis, which informs both the municipalization and CCA evaluation, the municipalization feasibility results, the CCA feasibility results, and then SSA, VPPA, and microgrids. Next slide. Okay, so there's really 4 distinct components of the utility supply chain: generation, transmission, distribution, and then the customers that take the service at the end of the line. In the municipalization scenario, which you'll see at the top, the city would take over, or the city utility would take over provision of service for all of those functions except for the transmission segment of the utility supply chain. TEP would continue to provide that service. In the CCA construct, the CCA would take on the provision of power supply and elements of the customer service, and customer-facing programs, but TEP would continue to provide transmission, distribution, and billing services. Microgrids and solar service agreements exist at the interface between the retail meter at the end of the distribution system and the physical customers at the end of the line. Lastly, virtual power purchase agreements, which is a city operations interest here. They're primarily financial in nature and do not have any grid-related implications. Okay. All right, Amber?
Sure. So this is just kind of showing, we like this map because it shows the state of Arizona and the various electric utility service areas. So we can see that there are many of those. And then Tucson Electric Power is the red area down on the lower right. And then we can see to the right here, this is showing in blue the city limits. So we're talking today just about the areas shaded in blue in this map over to the right. Okay. So as part of this study, it was really important to understand what the load looks like within the city and how that relates to TEP's entire service area. So TEP was very generous in providing us with the information we needed to do that. They gave us customer accounts and retail sales for city customers. And we found that approximately half of accounts and retail sales were those located within the city of Tucson. And this pie chart on the left shows a breakdown by customer class. So largely residential and then non-residential of the various sizes. Another component of the study is understanding TEP's retail rates. So this is showing the full retail rate for TEP's system historically for the past 5-6 years. So this includes all the rate riders. It's not just the base rates. And it's a system average. So this is an average across all the customer classes, residential and non-residential lighting, all of those circumstances. So let's see, I think with that, let's talk through, I'm gonna talk through the power supply buildup. This buildup was done using the load inputs from TEP, and then we assigned some hourly load shapes. And this is important for estimating the cost to serve power within the city. We need to know when folks are using energy because the value of energy, the cost of energy varies by time of day and time of year. So we wanted a detailed analysis. And we chose this base case portfolio. This is just for illustrative purposes. Ultimately, whatever public power entity, if it were formed, would choose its own portfolio and implement that. But just for the sake of the feasibility and making comparisons, we started with a 50% renewable energy year one, and then achieving that 100% renewable by 2045, which is the city's sustainability goal. So we built that up from the hourly load shapes, and this is shown on the right in that bar chart. So you can see the components include solar resources. There's a non-renewable portion. This is only the first 10 years, so still a fairly significant share of non-renewable energy costs. And then there's capacity purchases for reliability included, transmission purchases for using the transmission system, and ancillary services, which is a stability charge that's required for utilities. So this would apply to both the public power options, and by that I mean whether the city forms a municipal utility or a community choice aggregation program. And then we want to know how the city's options compare with TEP. So we used the publicly available data from their IRP, which was done in 2023. TEP plans to physically retire coal plants by 2033 and then invest in solar, battery, and wind. So that's their current plan. And I understand that that will be updated in the near future. So that will likely change over time. But for this study, this is what we worked off of. Their plan is to attain 100% greenhouse gas by 2050. And then also as part of the analysis, we wanted to understand what costs we might be leaving behind if the city were to pursue one of the public options. So as part of that, we don't want to make any of the remaining TEP customers outside the city any worse off. We want to hold them harmless. And so we included ongoing costs for the city's share of coal plant retirements, and then any net cost of TEP's production costs that they can't recoup when they sell the excess energy onto the market. Okay, so on this slide, this is just shown for information during the public outreach for the study. The social cost of carbon was brought up as something people were interested in understanding. So what does it mean to the social cost of carbon and the community when we achieve greenhouse gas neutrality sooner than what TEP is currently forecasting? So we obtained a couple of values. One is from the EPA. This was a value published in 2022. And then the second one is from a UC Davis made a study that looked at many different social cost of carbon valuation studies. And they interviewed researchers to obtain some values for social cost of carbon. So this would include health impacts, climate change impacts, and those things. So if we're looking at the 20-year net present value of only the impact and the change of carbon, so we're not looking at other greenhouse gases, just carbon only, the bottom two bullets here indicate the ranges of benefits. 2.7 to $4 billion under our base case scenario where we reach greenhouse gas neutrality by 2045. So again, this is not included in the financial feasibility, but it's provided as something that the community was interested in understanding for the public power options. Okay, so onto the municipal feasibility. So again, under this option, the city utility would be in charge of the generation and distribution of electricity to its customers, and TEP would continue providing transmission service, and the city would pay TEP for those services. So as part of this, the city would need to purchase the system from TEP. In the study, we provided a range of valuation methodologies to understand what the cost might be to the city for their share. We used a cost of service model provided by TEP to determine the city's share of its assets. And so this chart shows the buildup of those for the range that we came up with. So the first range is what we call the book value. And this is what they originally paid for the system, less the depreciation expense. And then on the higher end of the valuation is RCNLD, which is reproduction cost new less depreciation. So that's the cost if the city were to go out today and build the system again exactly how it is installed currently. Same voltages, same transformers, all the same exact equipment, what that cost would be to do that. And then less the depreciation portion, because that's already been collected through the retail rates. So we estimated that the city's share of the distribution plant and the general plant would include items like line trucks and equipment stores, things like that TEP would no longer need if they sold half of their system approximately. But but the city would need those things. So it would be in everybody's best interest if those were transferred to the city. So we valued those as well. So approximately half of TEP's total system would be acquired. The second to the bottom row, this is the plant as it existed in 2023. And then we escalated that based on future additions, retirements, and depreciation to get to the value of the plant in 2028. So this is an estimate that we provided. So with this methodology, again, it holds remaining TEP customers harmless. And we do include the cost for separation, reintegrating the system after the sale, but that's included separately. This pie chart shows the annual operating budget for the utility. So a large chunk goes to the power supply costs, main operation. The operating costs, this includes things like general and administrative, operation and maintenance on the distribution system, customer service, billing, programs, every sort of operating costs that would go into this. We developed those costs by looking at similarly sized municipal utilities and applying that to the city of Tucson customer count and load information data. And then we also benchmarked it against what TEP has reported their costs to be in their Form 1. So we feel pretty confident in that cost estimate. That we're holding the different taxing districts harmless. So we've included franchises and taxes as part of the utility budget. The capital improvement budget includes both investments that are funded directly through the rate revenue collected every year, as well as financing some of those. So it's a combination of those two. And the capital improvement budget we came up with is about what TEP has planned as well for the system, or at least the city's share of it. Also, line item costs include the power cost stranding, and then the debt service on all the different acquisition costs for the system. This chart has a lot of information, so I'll try to go through it. But we wanted to really call out the variables that we thought had the most influence on whether or not municipalization is feasible. And the first one is with regard to what TEP files for future rate cases. So what are their rate adjustments in the future? The middle column where it says feasibility base case, this is where the base case of the study is represented. And then for assumptions that are more favorable for the municipalization option, those would fall under the green heading, and then assumptions that would be less favorable for feasibility under the red heading. So for example, we're estimating that TEP's rates might increase at around 3.5% per year over the study timeframe. If it's less than that, it may not necessarily be infeasible, but it would certainly the difference between what TEP charges and what the muni would charge would be less. So the 25 average annual rate adjustment of 2% is lower than what we are projecting going forward. But on the other hand, if we're looking at a more near-term average, a 5-year rate adjustment, it's much higher, and that would, of course, be more favorable for feasibility. I talked already about the acquisition value methodology. So on the low value end is the book value of the system. So that's, again, what TEP paid for the system, less the depreciation expense. And then on the unfavorable, actually, let's start with the base case. In the study, we assumed a reproduction cost new, less depreciation, and then we added 10% to that for going concern. So this is an Arizona valuation construct. If the price paid for the system is higher than that, then of course that would mean that it's less favorable for feasibility. We believe that, or at least what we've experienced in municipalization, is that the price is somewhere between the book value and this reproduction cost value. It's usually somewhere in between those two. The transaction costs and timing. This one is a difficult one to flesh out, but we had to make some assumptions for the study to analyze it. And I think we're pretty upfront about that in the report. It's going to depend on how cooperative TEP is in letting the city exercise its options. So on the cooperative side, the cost would be less for transactions, fewer legal costs, less time in court. Maybe it won't take as long, a few years. And that, of course, all translates to reduced costs. On the other hand, if TEP decides that, gosh, we really don't want to sell this, and this is going to be a long process for you to implement, that's going to increase costs, and it's going to provide more time for some of these other variables that might be changing over time. So it could introduce more uncertainty with that regard. TEP, I understand, has stated that they're not interested in selling the system. For the base case in our study, we assumed something in between TEP being cooperative and TEP being more adversarial. And then on the last line here is the power supply costs and stranding costs. Typically, these are inversely related. So as power markets change, as they do, it's going to impact both of these items. And probably not going to have a huge impact unless there's a big structural change that can happen. And again, as the timing is extended to do a municipalization, that invites more opportunity for those material changes to happen. Okay, so the feasibility results are illustrated here. The municipal utility expenses, again, shown in the bar chart, and then TEP revenues in that red line. So this is indicating feasibility. So this includes all expenses and operating costs for the municipal utility under our base case assumptions. This is showing the potential bill savings for a residential customer, and it's showing the varying bill savings depending on the plant valuation methodology. So the blue bar chart items are based on a higher value of the system. So that reproduction cost value, that's our base case. So up to $705 a year in savings by the end of the study period for each residential customer. On the low end of those red bars, that's the net book value. So the city pays less for the system. They don't have to recover as much through rates to repay that takeout loan. So these savings wouldn't occur just to residential customers. They would occur to other customer classes as well. But residential is a lot easier to understand, so we presented it here. Okay. I'll keep going through the CCA analysis that we did. So community choice aggregation. So Matthew described at the beginning that this is where the city or other jurisdictions would come together and decide to purchase generation or the power supply for their jurisdictions, and they would serve customers. In this case, TEP would continue to serve as the distribution and transmission provider for everybody. So I should note here that CCA is not currently enabled in Arizona, And so what the study did is we developed a framework for evaluating this based on our extensive CCA experience and the idea of maximizing the benefit to ratepayers of a program construct. So similar to the municipal utility, this is demonstrating that CCA is feasible. But again, this is an optimal construct, and it relies on several assumptions about how a CCA program is designed. So some of these key issues are the CCA has to be able to purchase on the wholesale market to serve its customers. There can't be any barriers there. The CCA needs to be regulated by its board of directors and not by the Corporation Commission. This is typical for public power in most states anyway. Stranded costs are recovered over time through an annual charge that changes. It changes when resources are dropping off as they expire. It changes as the wholesale market values change as well. It's an opt-out program design, meaning that if you don't want to participate in the program, you would have to contact the CCA and say, hey, I don't want to be in. I want to be served by TEP, and you would opt out of the program. Otherwise, everybody would be enrolled, and so this maximizes the benefit to everybody since it's achieves economies of scale easier. And then also all customers would be eligible. So residential, commercial, everybody could join the CCA or opt out, as would be their choice. Okay, so CCA is feasible, and I'll turn it back to Matthew for the last couple of slides here.
Okay, 2 slides left. The study found that there are multiple attractive solutions as the city seeks to meet its operation-specific carbon neutrality plan. TEP's green energy tariff was added to the study scope as an option alongside solar service agreements and virtual power purchase agreements. As of today, the city has successfully executed many SSAs throughout the city. However, optimal locations for these types of installations are now getting more limited. So at the end of the day, the study finds that and indicates that really all 3 of these options or solutions should contribute to a portfolio approach in meeting the city's goals, as they are all 3 attractive in their various ways, as they're all very different in nature regarding functionality and risk. Next slide. Okay, a few takeaways about microgrids in the city. First off, any consideration of a microgrid must adhere to TEP's interconnection requirements for safety and grid protection purposes. This is standard across utility industry. Interconnecting any type of generation or storage device in front of the retail meter or sending electricity through the TEP-owned grid would require TEP's participation and in a coordinated effort. Next, microgrids are really valuable and financially viable when 2 or more of these 3 conditions are present. Service reliability is poor, the need for reliability is high, and the microgrid can enhance local resiliency and also provide valuable grid capacity. If at least 2 of those conditions are not met, it is typically very difficult to economically justify a microgrid that utilizes today's storage technologies to provide resiliency. The challenge, for the most part, exists in the fact that having energy storage on standby to be utilized very seldomly is very expensive, and in most cases that I've looked at, usually considered economically infeasible. Okay, next slide. Okay, Michael, you want to?
Well, I assume there are no
Wrap things up?
questions. That was really thorough. So we'll just end the meeting early. I'm kidding. So we have some questions in the chat. I think we can start there, and then as folks raise their hands, we'll go back and forth. We've got a good queue here now. So just leave your hand raised. I guess we'll start with the first one from the chat and it's about the TEP news release this month. Dan, do you want to come off pause and just or come off mute and ask the question?
Sure, I can do that. So the question I had was TEP did issue a news release this month saying that the energy sourcing study was, in their words, compromised by flawed assumptions about how much time and money would be needed to form a municipal utility. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to that. Obviously, they're being very adversarial about the study. And so I just wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that.
Okay, I'll start and anyone else on the GDS team can add to it. I guess really the answer is pretty simple. It's not surprising that TEP is not favorable of any ideas such as municipalization or even CCA, which wasn't touched on in their feedback. But specifically, the only place where I saw any specific critique was on the timeline, and it's understandable that a concern about the timeline is real. For the most part, though, in these circumstances, that timeline and any difficulties associated with that timeline is typically driven by how much the incumbent utility fights back. And so to the extent that they want to fight a lot and be adversarial to the city's interest to pursue what we consider their right to pursue, that would be the primary basis for why any kind of timeline estimates that we've included would be pushed out. But for the most part, all of the other assumptions that we've used, we think are credible. And so there weren't any specific call outs in that feedback to suggest otherwise.
Okay, they did actually mention quite a bit about assumptions about the cost and everything else, not just timelines. So I just to put that out there that they were very negative about all of the things that you looked at in the study.
Yeah, this is Ryan Barron. Oh, sorry, Matthew. We're a legal consultant.
Let me go real quick, Ryan. Yeah, I certainly do not disagree that they were very negative in regards to the feedback, though in my review of the specifics, there weren't any specific assumptions that they addressed as fallible. They just said, hey, it's wrong. And it's difficult for us to respond to that. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate what you said, Matthew, is of all the studies we've been involved in, I can't recall one where the investor-owned utility didn't have issues with the study, being that they're opposed as the incumbent and will try to critique it pretty heavily. It doesn't necessarily mean there's flaws in the study, but that's usually the what you tend to see, whether it's in Tucson or anywhere else.
Okay, great. Thanks, gang. Let's take Russell Lowe's. I think you're the first one out. You're on mute. You're still on mute, Russell. Okay, while he sorts that out, Robert Cook, you want to go?
Yeah, I just unmuted. Yeah, thank you. First of all, I just want to thank GDS for its work here. Those of us who have been working on these issues for decades certainly appreciate the fact that the city of Tucson has brought a world-class firm to really analyze the options in front of us. It's clear that the motivation for this study is basically that the investor-owned utility model has been inadequate to quicken the pace of this energy transition that we're all interested in seeing being successfully concluded. So with that, I just want to ask a couple of questions. One, I noticed that one of the technical problems you had was to disaggregate and separate the city of Tucson from the rest of TEP's service area, and that presented problems and costs in your analysis. Should Pima County and the city enter into some sort of joint powers agreement to pursue either municipalization or CCA jointly, would any of those costs come down a bit? Because we would be really taking over the energy sourcing part of our regional energy picture in that way. And I know that the county, as well as many other communities in Arizona, are looking at this study as a first step in considering feasibility. Please address the possibilities of say the city and the county coming together and doing this together.
I'll start. Howard, maybe, or Amber, you want to address the collective nature associated with CCA once I address the municipalization. So with municipalization, as you suggested, you have to actually separate the system and identify who's going to own what pieces. And that is always a challenge. As you adjust the footprint and you contemplate where the city is, what exists outside the city with the county, that could influence the costs and change or influence overall financial feasibility. In our view, I think the budgets that we have for separation and reintegration are appropriate, but they could certainly endure significant increases and have that not change the outcome of financial feasibility. So hopefully that addressed the municipalization part. Amber, Howard, do you want to touch on the CCA piece?
Yeah, this is Howard Choi. In California, at least, there are many CCAs that are joint multiple cities and counties. Not so much in the other states that we've seen. I think most of those are individual community CCAs, but they do partner together on purchasing power and other services while being separate CCAs. But like I said, in California, very, very common for county and city and other cities to work together under a governmental joint powers agreement.
Okay, great. Thank you. Russell, looks like you got off mute.
Yeah, it didn't work on this little micro screen, but it worked on the bigger one. So thank you, Matthew, Amber, and Howard of GDS for your work on the different options for the city of Tucson, its operations and the general population. And thanks for taking to heart the 2045 goal of 100%, or maybe even earlier, as you refer to in the study. I appreciate the work that was done on the costs of solar, improving that from the original just pre-draft version, and based on the analysis of CCA, how 18% difference could be acquired. I just wanted a little bit of reaction on that, but first I wanted to say solar for TEP is really at 13.2% for 2023, which is the year that you're using. The 20% figure in section 2.1 makes the mistake of reducing the denominator to only include retail sales, but does not reallocate the solar to the non-retail sales. In accounting, we would call that an allocation error. I'm an accountant also. Really, the denominator should include total sales, otherwise it hides a lot of dirty energy. It's erroneous to claim that they're at 20% in general. Put another way, you're essentially lumping all the solar into the numerator, but then reducing the total energy produced and sold to only include retail load. This, again, is erroneous, and it would be best to include all the energy procured. However, if you want to address the retail load only, then the solar energy needs to be allocated accordingly. So at 9,101,028 megawatt hours of retail sales, 59.45% of the 15,308,00 megawatt hour sales, then only 59.45% of that would be solar. And that comes out to, when you divide the 1199 107 by 9,101,028, it equals 13.2, not coincidentally. But yeah, I would like a bit of commenting on the 18%. The 20% figure should be fixed in your final draft because it's just simply not true. But the 18% reductions, how did you come to that? It's pretty close to what I have come to in my modeling, but I'm wondering how you came to that specifically. And thanks again. I really appreciate all your work on this.
So Russell, I'll have to get back to you on the 18%. I don't want to answer that right now. I want some time to look at it. Maybe we can I can send a response later. As
Okay.
for the other stuff, I think you're right about the the retail sales versus including wholesale production. I will state that we did not include the wholesale portion because TEP has stated that they retain all of their RECs. And so that would assume that those would go to the retail portion, which is why we went with the 20% figure.
Well,
So
that would be fine if they wanted to do that, but
Yeah.
then they should allocate the percent, the 59% essentially, to the denominator and the numerator, not just
Yeah.
one or the other, because it's then making them look like it's basically allowing them to hide a whole bunch of dirty energy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
Okay, thanks.
Garrett, you put a question in the Q&A. If you want to just come off mute, we'll take you next. Oh, no problem. He can't come off mute. So he appreciates the detailed information in the report. He's considering how policy makers will read the final report. Section 3.18 had clear statements on the outcome of public power. As a reader, he expects Section 4 on CCA to have a similar section with comparable statements on savings for ratepayers and greenhouse gas emissions. He read the CCA could save 18% for the city. Is that comparable to the Muni's 9% savings for ratepayers? Could the CCA save up to 18% for ratepayers? I think is the essence of the question. I think that's for you, Amber.
Yeah, so I think the CCA savings would be only on the generation portion of the bill, which is only part of it. So I don't think it's quite comparable to the Muni's savings percentage. So we would have to calculate the total bills for both and compare the percentage savings that way. I feel like I missed part of answering that question. Was there something else that I didn't?
Well, I think it's just making sure it's sort of apples to apples and not.
Oh, yes.
So I think that would probably be a written response.
That's good
too.
feedback. Yeah.
Great. Kathy, the last, Della Penta, you're on mute.
Can you
Yep.
you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, so I have two questions and I might be mixing some stuff up. The chart that showed that the city would buy half of TEP on managing, the city would manage, TEP would transmit, and does the city distribute or does TEP distribute? Oh, the city utility would also distribute? Yeah, hold on, it was the one just before that.
One before, oh, this one.
Yeah. The
Mhm.
city, so the city would distribute, okay, because I thought I heard someone saying something else. So the next question is, assuming that the city would then buy half of whatever, we know that TEP has these rice gas powered whatevers. Would the city have to swallow those as well or work with those?
No, the study doesn't assume that the city would take over anything generation that TEP currently owns. Um, that could potentially be a negotiation, but I would say if the city decided they didn't want those generators, they certainly don't have to purchase them. TEP would just sell the output and attributes on the market to recover the costs.
Okay, thank you.
And we've accounted for that in the study through the cost stranding.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So April had a question that's in the chat, and it's regarding the political feasibility within the city of Tucson. And I don't think GDS can kind of speak to this yet. We haven't presented the report, but I'll say the question out loud and just confirm that with you all. Would the city government view the acquisition as worthwhile if TEP is going to be begrudging and resistant to municipalization? I don't think you guys can answer on behalf. I don't want you to answer on behalf of mayor and council. I think that's a question for them. Any other thoughts on that though, Matt? You?
I'm sorry, Michael. Can you say the question one more time, please?
It was a question regarding the political feasibility within the city of Tucson, and if the city government would view the acquisition as worthwhile if TEP is going to be begrudging and resistant to municipalization.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything that's really valuable to add to, say, yours or council's or mayor's perspective on that question.
Yeah, I think that is a question for mayor and council, and I think that's fair. Rick, you had a question?
Yeah, am I being heard?
Yes, sir.
So the big elephant in the room, of course, was pointed out by Susan Gray in her as CEO of TEP in that the PR release yesterday. Is there a way to quantify the amount of money that might be expended in extensive litigation that could make this study, the feasibility of municipalization, unfeasible? I mean, can you put a number on it based on what you've put down, the numbers you have for feasibility? What does it take for that to become infeasible? I mean, there's a number of jurisdictions around here, Boulder, Colorado, Pueblo, Colorado, that tried and failed. And I'm not sure, I'm not trying to say that it can't be done. I just know that at some point they may even be slap lawsuits by TEP trying to just do whatever they possibly could to stop this from happening. And of course, that would have to be fought out in court, whether it's frivolous or not. But there's got to be a number that could be or couldn't be expended before that became unfeasible. Do you have that number?
Amber, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think in our study, I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was 10 or 15 million that we included for transaction legal fees. And you mentioned Boulder, Colorado, they spent almost 30 million over 10 years fighting with Excel. So presumably, even if the legal costs were 2 to 5 times what we've included in the study, we still estimate that that still could be feasible. I think the bigger issue would probably be the timing and what changes in the planning environment over that time that you're spending in court. That might change the results of the feasibility.
And then just thank you. And one other one on the CCA description, and you're talking about the legislation in 2022. It was Bill 2021, I think, in the year 2022. Would that have to be repealed in order for CCA to have a chance in Arizona? Or does that only apply to jurisdictions over 75,000 people? Could Marana, could Oro Valley, could any number of smaller municipalities pursue CCA because they don't fit within that that legislation?
I don't know if Ryan has a response to that.
Okay.
I'd have to look at the specific threshold you're looking at. I don't have that data in front of me, but I mean, it was our conclusion that, you know, the striking out of sort of the retail choice competition language in the statutes is what's really prevented CCA from going forward. So there'd have to be a legislative change to allow it across the board. I don't have an answer to your specific.
Okay, yeah, I think
that number.
75, there's an exemption for over 75. They basically just tried to target Tucson, I think, and Phoenix, and then, but that legislation, but okay, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you.
The next question we'll take from Bruce. Do you want to come off mute, or I can read it? Bruce Blank. Not hearing you. I'll just say it was some opponents of municipalization have claimed that GDS studies always favor municipalization and or CCA. Is that true?
The answer is no. We recently released a study where we indicated that municipalization was not feasible for another client.
It was in the papers that Pueblo was mentioned by someone a few minutes ago. We did the study for the city of Pueblo, and it said that it was not feasible.
Great, thank you. Lee, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, hi, and sorry, I'm Lee Zishi with Tucson DSA. I, for some reason, was not able to find the chat at all. Like I clicked every button. I don't know.
No problem.
I'm turning 36. I'm getting old. I can't do technology. So I had two questions. The first one is there's some experts and other people who have done things around public power that we have shared the study with, but because of like the pretty quick turnaround of just getting it on Friday, they weren't able to get our questions in time. Is there a way that if we have questions in the next couple of days, we can reach out to GDS about them, or they might also be for the city as well? And like, who would be the best person to send those to is my first question.
Great, no problem. That's me. You can send it to me, Michael Catanzaro. I'll put it in the chat, and you might even go to that first slide, Amber, okay, just with my email address. Any questions, please send along to me, and I'll make sure there's a response.
Great, thank you so much. And
you bet.
And then my second question was kind of around like the timing and like the process of this all. I'm wondering, one, like, is there going to be any other kind of public input where the public can come middle of the day forum? And then I guess just also in that question, like, the timing seems a little concerning to me, that if the city is not getting, the mayor and council are not getting the final report until May 20th, I know at the same time, the city's also talking to TEP about a potential franchise agreement, and that has to be finalized in June. And so specifically, since this feasibility study said that there would need to be a vote in order for municipalization to happen, I guess it seems like that should be a part of the consideration about moving forward with a franchise agreement. You know, like, say it's a great, like, there's a franchise vote this year, and then the city says, wow, look, could save us money, it saves customers money, putting a vote next year. Or, you know, I'm just curious kind of how the city is approaching these timelines that seem really not to align and give a lot of chance really for public input, and also like, yeah, just the city to really look through the options before moving forward with a franchise agreement.
Sure, I can address that to a certain extent. There is a lot kind of going on all at once, no doubt. I assume that the energy forums, the energy collaboration agreement forums that are happening over the next 2 weeks will also be an opportunity to get input from folks on this. We're going to be focusing more on the energy collaboration agreement there for sure. But I think that's another opportunity and to get input. And then even passing the franchise agreement doesn't preclude us from still municipalizing. And I think under any scenario, we'd look to extend the franchise agreement because there's no real feasibility of acquiring and municipalizing within the next year before the franchise agreement expires. So they're not mutually exclusive is sort of the short answer to that. Is there anything else, team, that I missed on that?
No, Michael, thanks for putting that out there. Yeah, they are not mutually exclusive. We can pursue either or both, and it's not necessary. We wouldn't be hemmed in by doing one or the other.
Great, thank you. Katie B, I see you have a question. Do you want to come off mute, or I can read it if you prefer?
Basically, I know that TEP is a larger, thank you, Michael, and thank you very
bet.
much for the study, everybody. I'm not super knowledgeable about this, but I do know that TEP as a current larger regional player has a role as a balancing agent where they make sure, and I think I was reading and learning that not every large utility has that role where they're watching and balancing what's coming and going. Would the city then be taking over some of that role, or does TEP maintain the balancing role with just the city as being one little part that they would be balancing? Is that clear enough?
Yeah, I understand that.
Yes, it's a good question. TEP would continue to function as the balancing authority and govern the balancing authority in the municipalization scenario. Amber, you want to reference CCA or Howard?
Oh, yeah, it's the same for the CCA as well. They would retain that.
Thank you.
Great. Now I think we're through the, there's one more question from the Q&A. Dan, about the federal executive orders. You want to state that?
Sure, just a really quick question, and I know you may not have the specific answer, but I was just wondering, did you consider, since the timing of the federal executive orders essentially trying to prevent the retirement of any coal-fired generation plants, was that considered at all as you were looking at the costs in the study?
We're going off of what TEP has said they're doing with their plants. And I think we all know that executive orders aren't necessarily law. So we're going off of what the owner says they're doing.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Stephen, your hand's up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I sort of a long-term question, assuming that the city would do acquisition of the assets. And right now the trend is ever increasing energy, but that could change in the future. If, for example, the grid became much more capable and saturated than it is now, what would be the liability to the city of having to meet much stiffer competition in terms of price? And then also the added question is the cost to the city of long-term of maintenance. I have seen some city-owned utilities in the past, long ago past, they didn't maintain their assets well enough, and eventually ended up sending a lot of extra costs to the ratepayers.
How about I answer the second part of the question, Amber, and how about I'll just start and you can finish up. So in terms of maintenance and system utility management, You are absolutely right. If a city utility or really any utility is poorly run, and you can see that in utilities that have millions of consumers and utilities that have 10,000 consumers, if it's poorly run and not appropriately capitalized, that can create reliability issues, all kinds of issues for citizens, and then create rate issues that maybe citizens were not expecting. So that is a legitimate question and concern about how to assure that a potential or future city utility has the wherewithal to do what's necessary to maintain its system. I'm not perfectly clear on the first part of the question regarding the grid having more competition. I'm thinking maybe you're talking about distributed generation, self-served energy, things like that.
Well, it goes to the balance that you were talking about with TEP. So, for example, they're sourcing as they need to from the grid. And that will, I assume, be continued. There'll be a national sharing of the grid wherever and whenever it needs to be. If the city has its own assets and own generation, will its participation in that grid be compromised by all the other competition out there?
I don't think so. I think any market pressures or market circumstances that I think that you're mentioning and talking about would likely be experienced by both TEP and the city, or TEP only in a similar manner. So I'm not sure that a change in market would dramatically change our perspective, other than to the extent that it influences our short-term decisions, acquisition, pricing, and stuff like that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm seeing one in the chat from April about the CCA option. Does it factor in costs for lobbying to change state legislation for enabling legislation for community choice aggregation?
That's a good question, April. It does not include any sort of initial implementation costs that would be associated with getting it up and going in the legislature.
Robert Cook, I see a question in the chat. Do you want to come off mute?
Yes. Let's see what my question was.
It was about the 2025 investor-owned utility model itself.
Increasingly, as I analyze this, and by the way, I've been doing this for 50 years. I was one of the original authors in the 70s that looked at the transition to a renewable energy economy. It was one of the first macro studies in the United States. So this is a long time coming for me, and it's very clear to me that the investor-owned utility model, which was appropriate at the time when we needed to electrify this country, is sort of obsolete now. It's the major barrier to moving forward. We deregulated the phone industry and the airline industry, and it's time to deregulate the electricity industry. This reliability problem is going to, we're going to need a smart grid. We're going to need national standards. We're going to need, federal leadership here. And right now, the way states and municipalities and other jurisdictions are coping with this transition is trying to figure out ways to use competition, which lowers prices, to get clean energy into the mix. That's the thing. And getting rid of the stranded assets is the major barrier. If we were able to shut down and retire these coal plants tomorrow, we would be in a much better shape. And where's the creative thinking going into retiring it? We can't wait till 2032 to do this. The world is falling apart, folks. And our political system is becoming unable to solve problems because of these disruptions: immigration, costs, supply chains, competition, resource problems. And for a Canadian company that lives in a that is managing 500 wildfires a year during the summer heat, is that our future? No. So my question is, how can a for-profit utility in 2025 argue that it can outperform a nonprofit utility that is investing in state-of-the-art forward green technology? I mean, everyone looking at this issue. You don't have to be an economist to know that when you remove the profit margin out of this picture, you get a much clearer understanding of what the actual cost to a municipality would be. And
Well, you got cut off there. I don't think we can speak for TEP and how they justify that. Matt, do you have anything to say to that?
I would say, just real quickly, there are some circumstances where an investor-owned utility can have advantages relative to a public power utility based on its legacy capacity positions relative to, say, a very high capacity environment, or existing debt that is very low cost relative to an environment where we might be acquiring very high cost debt. Those two things can be advantages, but in terms of business model, I wouldn't say there's a particular or specific advantage that can exist long term.
Okay, thanks. Robert?
So my question relates to, I understand there is a current agreement between the city and TEP spending $300,000 a year, I believe, for for the city to be saying that they're getting renewable energy from TEP. And my question is there any additionality to that, meaning that there's an actual reduction of CO2 emissions from the community, or is that a simple purchase of RECs such that the city's claiming bragging rights, but yet it has no impact on actual community emissions? And if so, why don't we just spend the $300,000 building solar on city projects instead of reallocating it from the rest of the community?
Yeah, I can field that. It is just subscribing to their existing green tariff program, so there's no additionality to it. We are looking at options B and C, which is land owned by the city being used for either a directly owned by the city PP SSA or something owned by TEP. So we're looking at those additional options, but we're trying to take action immediately as we continue to work towards the longer additionality challenges. So it's not new to start, but the intention is to get there.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I've got to say that it makes way more sense to me for the city to be spending $300,000 actually building things that have carbon reductions as a part of the project, rather than just a reallocation of resources that's costing the city that much money. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any other hands up, although I did get a note. Rick, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
When I go to post in the chat, I mean, maybe other people have this, it just says you can't send messages. You are not a member of the chat. Is there any trick to getting out of that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I wanted to post in the chat and not keep raising my hand. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, you bet. Bruce, I asked if Tucson became a muni, could it get cheap power from WAPA, from WAPA?
I'd say that's a good potentially. Garrett, are you on and available to respond? What's better, like response than yes, maybe?
Yeah, happy to respond.
Thanks.
You know, I think there are a number of supply alternatives that one could consider in the marketplace. It's really difficult to conjecture about the availability of a WAPA resource to the city, uh, independent of actual conversations and discussions. But the answer is that one can engage with market suppliers for potential supply, and I think that would be the base response.
Great, thanks. Megan Howard had a question in the chat. If separation and reintegration costs are not included in the base case, how are the costs accounted for separately?
Okay, I'm glad you asked this because I just want to clarify that the base case does include separation and reintegration costs. So they are included. I think it was confusing on that slide I was discussing because we were talking just about the plant valuation methodologies, which is different from separation and reintegration.
Good catch. Or reminder for us to clarify.
Hey, Rick, you have another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that the fact that Tucson Electric Power so quickly came up with basically a laundry list of things that you did wrong without actually pointing out they're mostly generalizations, I think just goes to show how thorough you were, because what you've provided, I think you provided a great service to the city. I hope the city does something with this other than just, try and come up with $250,000 that they spent you for you. But really, the having all these meetings and the knowledgeable people on your staff, and actually my heart is out there for Russell is one of our most knowledgeable people on this, and that Amber just, acknowledged that and will change things based upon what Russell said, or at least look at what Russell said, if that makes sense. I mean, it says a lot about your willingness to understand and make the right decision. Thanks.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, we've got a little time. I don't want to cut it short too quickly. Katie, go ahead.
There were no questions, so I just am looking at all the information about Spain and Portugal and their, lack of power, and people supposing, oh, is it because of renewables or not? And they don't know yet, but those kinds of trends, does this study take into account what backup the city would have to pop something online if we needed to? Or, I mean, I don't even know if you can answer that, but I'm just thinking it's a timely topic based upon what happened in Spain.
I think to the extent we considered microgrids, that's a piece of what that looks like. I don't think that was really included in any other part of the report, though. But it is a good consideration. Ron Proctor? Still not hearing you.
You're muted, Ron.
Okay, yeah, I got to the right thing, sorry. If the city decided to try to municipalize and TEP fought it tooth and nail, meaning that it'd be for years or whatever time frame before it might actually happen, would that throw off the city's goal to meet carbon neutrality by the date that they have they've said at this point? Does it mean that would push that out that far or push it out farther?
I'll respond real quickly. And I think inevitably, to the extent that you can't begin staging your power supply in the manner that you want to meet your goals, and that is delayed, it would negatively impact the time frame for meeting those goals.
Great. Judith, your hand's up.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. What a great study. Thank you for all the detail. My question is simple, but will require a big answer, I think. What is the absolute minimum of TEP assets that would qualify Tucson, having purchased them, to call itself a municipalization utility? In other words, Amber was saying that there would be no requirement to purchase the generation assets that, of course, all the gas turbines we really wouldn't want. But what is the absolute minimum of things? Is it the distribution grid? What exactly is it?
I'll start, Amber. Judith, I like your creative thinking. I think I'll just for them to be a independent municipal utility, you would have to buy the requisite amount of the distribution system to effectuate a true separation of your system and TEP system. And even though I love the creative thinking, the plan and perspective that we've taken, I don't know if we could diminish the volume of assets to be acquired very much and still meet that need to effectively separate. In regards to the generation side of things, Amber, do you want to address that?
Yeah, on the generation assets, I think we've accounted for that in the study with the generation cost trending. I do want to circle back on the distribution asset side, because I think it's more than just a physical acquisition question. There may be more of like a legal definition that would need to be looked at. And then, of course, the physical assets, and also taking into account distribution cost trending. If you take a subset and you leave the remaining customers with more costs as a result. So I think it's a really interesting question. And one I know we didn't evaluate in detail. We looked more at just the city as a whole. But I appreciate the thought on it.
My question is aimed in this way. For CCA, which would be a win-win for both the utility and the ratepayers, because TEP can and will and has cranked up the cost of distribution. So between the stranded assets fee that they will be paid, plus the distribution fees that they will be paid, and as you said, they could be still generating dirty energy and selling it elsewhere. That would seem to me to be a reasonable a reasonable way for TEP to allow CCA or some kind of alternative that would allow ratepayers and the city in aggregate to choose our own energy mix. In Utah, I believe it's Rocky Mountain Power worked with the city and then with the state PUC to, and they're still working on it, to figure out how municipalities could choose their mix of energy and still keep the main utility in the mix. So my question was geared toward, if we had to buy the distribution system, probably TEP wouldn't want to sell it anyway. So getting down to it, is there any alternative that you saw that could be a win-win for the utility and the city and the ratepayers, which we have our own needs? The city has its role, but neither the city nor TEP seems to be really advocating strongly for the ratepayers. So in the course of the study, did you see any opening, any crack in this adversarial scenario that you could suggest as a possible win-win situation?
Yeah,
I'll go first. I like the way you're thinking, and I'll just chime in on I think you used the word relationship, and as you try to find a Venn diagram that fits for two different parties, relationship is what's necessary to really find a place that could create value for both entities. And so without that relationship, it's likely that more painful outcomes are ahead.
Yeah, I'm laughing, but that's it. Instead of crying. But thank you. That's a clear way of saying it. It's ironic that shareholders' interests and the public interests are so at odds at this point.
Okay, thanks. Eric, did you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Hi, I was just wondering if there was any consideration that was put into the distribution systems or future investments if municipalization occurred, what the sensitivity was in terms of like ongoing investments looking ahead.
Go ahead, Amber.
Our ongoing investment, the budget that we've included for the municipal utility was approximately 4% of the replacement or the reproduction cost value, which I think is just a way of saying the ongoing investment is a share of the current value of the system as it gets replaced. And so alternatively, we didn't look at, what would happen if the city wants to do a bunch of undergrounding projects or other projects that would lead to community benefits. I do think that the results of this study show that could be an option because there is net revenue that would be generated through the municipal utility, and the utility could decide how to use that net income on projects.
Okay, great. So if I maybe repeat back what you said, it was kind of like and correct me if this is wrong, sort of a business as usual case in terms of utility operations, and we didn't try to include doing a lot of different things that would maybe make it different than the projections put out by TEP, so that these things could be compared apples to apples.
I think I would need to go back and look at the numbers specifically, but when we were putting the analysis together, the intent was to allow for more capital investment than what TEP is currently planning. Just with the understanding, or has done recently, I should say. I don't know what their future projections and budgets are, but I know what they have invested in the last few years, according to their public documents. And so we've assumed that there would be more investment than what those have shown. Um, but you're right that we didn't do any specific analysis around what that might look like.
Thank you. Great work on the study.
Thank you.
Carl Christensen, you have a question. Do you want to come off mute, or I can read it? Oh, okay. Is the model of having the incumbent private power company, in this case TEP, performing transmission duties in all scenarios typical to all studies and models, or is that specific to this study per constraints put on the study by the city or TEP? For example, why does, for example, the municipalization model of this study not include acquisition replacement of transmission equipment duties?
This construct is consistent for this scenario in which a share of a larger system is being acquired. If in the scenario that all of TEP's territory and systems and assets were acquired, then that new utility would take over all functions of the supply chain. But in this case, that's not the scenario that we're evaluating. Anything to add, GDS team?
I would just point out, this is Garrett Cole with GDS. I would just point out that it depends. Not all municipal communities are at the size that one would consider taking on the transmission system assets. So it's different here in this case with Tucson.
Okay, great. Russell?
Yeah, I have a question on, I read over the legal perspective on CCE or CCE, and I'm wondering how that was reached and who was involved in the legal opinion on that, or the perspective on that. We did get an email from the AG office suggesting that either the legislature or the ACC, the Arizona Corporation Commission, could authorize CCE, but that there would be a battle either way, they said. That's not an official opinion of the AG office because emails cannot be official positions of the AG. But so I'm wondering how you came to that perspective and who was involved in that. Thank you.
Ryan, are you there to take that question?
Yeah, I'm here. This is Ryan Barron. I'm a partner with Best and Krieger. We're a sub-consultant to GDS on the study, and we reviewed both the CCA legal analysis and the municipalization legal analysis. I think, the legislature ultimately has to reinstate it. There are provisions where when the ACC passes a regulation, there's a certain threshold where it has to be reviewed and certified by the Attorney General's office. And so that was sort of the subject of one of the court cases that we cited in there as a footnote. So I don't know exactly what they said, and but I mean, it's our opinion that yes, I think both would have to come down on that. But ultimately, I think the legislature has to make a legislative change as a matter of state policy to reinstate it, if you will, or at least the ability to do retail competition.
Thank you.
Thanks. Moran?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to build on Judith's comment about trying to find partnership possibilities with TEP. When I was looking at page 11 of your report, I think what I was reading was that TEP projects little to no growth in energy sales. That caught my attention, as it seems like if we want to get to clean energy, it's a lot of electrification, and if we're talking about electrifying, say, transportation, it does seem like the load would increase over time, and with an increase of scale, makes me wonder if there's a possibility of potentially sharing the profits from that between TEP and the city. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. And I guess the question, did I read that correctly, that TEP is projecting little to no growth in energy sales? I'm not sure quite what that means.
Yeah, Matthew, is that, or Amber?
I think I can answer the first part. The sales growth. So it's based on their IRP load forecast, where they do include some electrification assumptions in there. So I guess I would refer back to their IRP for a better understanding of where they're getting their load forecast.
Do you think it's because of energy efficiency that they are assuming is going to be taking care of any increase in otherwise what would be load?
I see Joe shared a link in the comment box. I'll just point to that. But also, yeah, typically when just generally doing electric load forecasts, you would take into account energy efficiency trends, some behind the meter resource trends, as well as electrification.
Great. Bruce, did you want to come off mute and ask your question? Well, not hearing you. He asked if we looked at Ann Arbor, Michigan Sustainable Electric Utility Plan as a variation on municipalization.
I have not. I don't know if there's on the GDS team have or not.
I don't know enough about that to speak to it. I think we tried to stick pretty closely to the scope on this project, the way it was written.
Okay, Rick, you had a question?
Yeah. Can I be heard? Are you hearing me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So this probably is a little bit outside of your scope, but when you fund something like a municipalization, I mean, I'm assuming that it's a bond measure. Are there restrictions on when you start doing municipal bonds? Can you say in your bond prospectus you anticipate big legal fees and some of this will go to legal fees, or are you excluded when you start to seek financing for municipalization from using municipal bonds, at least as the measure of financing? Are you excluded from certain outlays?
You are right in suggesting that I would want to answer this more clearly in return, but I think different types of bonds can fund different efforts and measures. And so I think in my experience, there's a degree of gray area there that they'll allow, but you'd have to be pretty specific when issuing your bonds to indicate what those bonds will be used for and the time frame in which they would be utilized. So I think it's something, a good question that would need to be answered.
Thanks. I can't seem to lower my hand here, but my hand's lowered.
Gotcha. Well, feels like we're nearing the end. If there's additional questions, again, my email is right here on the screen. You can email me questions over the next few days and into eternity, really. But if you want them addressed for this, I encourage you to do that certainly by Friday. Any questions you have or points of clarification. I want to thank everybody, GDS, for your time and presentation, the public for taking time out of your afternoon to come here and be a part of this and ask questions and be engaged in this. It's really helpful. And just thank you. Kind of hang out here for a couple minutes as people drop off in case anything else comes up. But thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, not seeing anything else pop up. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting.
Nice job
Thanks.
managing all the questions, Michael.
I tried. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.
day.
Thank you all.
Good work. Thank you.